The silent void of deep space stretched endlessly around the damaged research vessel. Celestial Seeker inside Commander Talek moved through the dim emergency lighting, his four-fingered hand trailing along the wall for support the ship's usual. Low hum was gone, replaced by occasional creaks and the hiss of failing systems. Talek was not meant to die here. No one was. The Orion Collective ships were the pride of the galaxy, advanced, self-repairing, and nearly impossible to disable. Yet here, he was trapped in a crippled vessel millions of miles from the nearest outpost. Log entry. 47 day 12 after the incident. Talek spoke clearly, his voice echoing in the empty command center. Main engines remain offline, backup systems operating at 31%. Capacity life support stable but limited to the command deck and my quarters. He paused, looking out the viewport at the unfamiliar star patterns. His homeworld sun wasn't even visible from here. Still no response to my distress signals. He continued. I've boosted the power to the communication array by shutting down non-essential systems if anyone is listening. They should be able to hear me now. But Tal knew the truth. The collective had probably received his signal days ago. Their silence wasn't. Due to technical problems, it was a decision. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The ship's computer had finished its latest analysis. Talek moved to the glowing screen and read the report. His shoulders slumped as the numbers confirmed what he already suspected. Even with strict rationing, his supplies would last only another 74 days. Computer, show me the damage assessment again. He ordered. A three-dimensional model of his ship appeared, with more than half of it flashing red. The propulsion system was completely destroyed, torn apart when they passed too close to what they thought was a stable neutron star. The unexpected radiation burst had fried many of the ship systems and killed everyone else instantly. Talek had survived only because he'd been in the heavily shielded research lab at the time. Computer, calculate the nearest collective outpost that could mount a rescue. Talek asked, though he already knew the answer. The nearest outpost with rescue capabilities is Station 12, approximately 3 light years from current position, the flat voice responded. Too far, much too far. With his hand steady but his heart racing, Talek opened the secured communication channel to Collective Command. This would be his 7th message since the accident. The previous 6 had gone unanswered. This is Commander Talek of Research Vessel Celestial Seeker. Day 12 after critical system failure, requesting immediate extraction. I have valuable research data that must be preserved. Please respond. He ended the transmission and waited. Minutes passed in silence. Then unexpectedly the communication panel lit up. Talek rushed to the console, hope surging through him. Computer, play incoming message. The screen flickered and the stern face of High Commander Vex appeared. Talek recognized him as one of the senior members of the Collective Council. This was unusual. Typically, rescue operations were handled by lower-ranking officials. Commander Talek. Vex began, his voice formal and cold. Your situation has been assessed by the Council based on your ship's condition, location, and the resources required for extraction. We have determined that a rescue operation falls below our efficiency threshold. Talek felt his body go numb. Your research data, while valuable, does not justify the expenditure of resources necessary to retrieve it. Or you, at this time, the Celestial Seeker and all personnel aboard, are hereby classified as a calculated loss. The words hit Talek like physical blows. A calculated loss, the Collective's term for when saving something or someone cost more than its designated value. Your family has been notified of your status and will receive the standard compensation package. Your service to the Collective has been noted. In the archives, Vex's expression didn't change as he delivered what amounted to a death sentence. This will be our final communication. May your remaining time be productive. End transmission. The screen went black. Talek stood frozen before the console. He had always known that the Collective operated on strict cost-benefit analyses. It was how they had built their advanced civilization, by never wasting resources on inefficient endeavors. But he had never thought that principle would be applied to his own life. Computer, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Delete draft rescue request messages deleted. The computer confirmed. Would you like to create a new message template? No. There's no point. Now Talek moved slowly to the viewport, staring out at the stars that now seemed cold and hostile. The collective had abandoned him. They had decided his life wasn't worth saving. Decades of loyal service, his brilliant research career. All of it meant nothing when measured against the fuel and resources needed for a deep space rescue. In the days that followed, Talik moved through the ship like a ghost. He carefully rationed his food and water. He shut down more systems to conserve power, and each day he recorded his observations and thoughts, maintaining the scientific discipline that had defined his life. Log entry, 53-day 18. He spoke into the recorder. I've begun experimenting with the hydroponics bay. If I can restart even a small portion of it, I might extend my supplies. By several weeks he didn't mention the crushing loneliness or the anger that sometimes overwhelmed him. Such emotional displays were considered primitive in collective culture. Efficiency and logic were what mattered, and logically the council had made the correct decision. He just never thought he'd be on the wrong side of that logic on day 23. As Talik was checking the oxygen recyclers, the ship suddenly trembled. Computer status report. He called out, grabbing onto a wall handle to steady himself. Unknown energy surge detected. The computer responded. Origin. The neutron star remnant. Recommend immediate defensive measures. Talik rushed to the command center. On the screen, he could see the distant star flaring brightly. Another radiation burst was coming, one that might finish what the first had started with practiced movements. Talik diverted power to the shields. The ship's remaining energy reserves wouldn't be enough to protect the whole vessel, but he might save the command center and his quarters. As the wave of radiation washed over the ship, systems failed one by one. Lights flickered and died. The temperature began to drop as the environmental controls went offline. When it was over, Talik sat in near darkness. The emergency backup power providing only the most basic functions. Computer damage assessment, he said quietly. Communication array severely damaged. Life support operating at minimum capacity. Estimated remaining operational time 42 days. Talik nodded slowly. The collective had abandoned him, and now even his slim chance of survival was fading. He was truly alone in the vastness of space, with nothing but a dying ship and the cold stars for company. As he stared out into the darkness, something caught his eye, a faint pulsing light that hadn't been there before. Probably just debris from his ship reflecting the distant starlight. Talik turned away. He had work to do if he wanted to survive even 42 more days. And despite everything, despite the collective's abandonment and the hopelessness of his situation, he found that he still wanted to live. He just didn't know why anymore. 37 days had passed since the collective abandoned Talik. His once pristine uniform hung loose on his frame. The strict rationing had kept him alive, but barely. Each day the cold of space crept further into the ship as systems failed one by one. Log entry 78. Talik said, his voice rougher than before. Day 37. I've managed to repair part of the hydroponic system. The first crop of nutrient pods should be ready in 2 weeks, assuming the grow lights hold out. He didn't mention that the lights were already flickering or that the water recycler made alarming noises whenever it ran. Some facts were too depressing to record. Dilk finished his daily check of the life support systems and returned to the command center. This had become his routine. Maintain the ship, check for signals, record his logs, and then sit at the viewport, watching the stars. The mysterious light he had seen weeks ago had not appeared again. Probably just space debris after all. He was about to turn away when something on the sensor panel caught his eye. A faint beeping, almost too quiet to hear. Computer identify incoming signal. Talik said, rushing to the console. Signal detected. Origin unknown. Not matching any collective patterns. Talis's heart speed faster. Display signal data. The screen filled with a strange pattern, pulses and pauses. Unlike anything in the collective database. Not random noise, but definitely not collective communication either. Is it a natural phenomenon? Talik asked. Negative signal contains regular patterns consistent with artificial origin. Artificial, made by intelligent beings. Someone was out there. Can you determine the source location? The computer took longer than usual to respond. Approximate source location. Identified signal originates from Sector 47J, approximately 0. 8 light years from current position, less than 1 light year away. That was closer than any collective outpost, but who could it be? The collective had explored this region thoroughly and found no intelligent species nearby. Computer, divert power from non-essential systems to boost our transmission capabilities. I want to respond to this. Signal warning. Diverting power will reduce life support efficiency by 17%. Do it anyway. Talek ordered. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than despair. As the computer rerouted power, Talek quickly composed a response message. He included basic mathematical sequences that any intelligent species should recognize, along with the ship's identification and location data transmitting. Now the computer announced. Talek waited, hardly daring to breathe. Minutes passed, then hours. By the time he gave up and went to his sleeping quarters, his earlier excitement had faded. Perhaps the signal had been a glitch or some strange echo from a distant star. He was halfway through his small daily meal when the alarm sounded. Incoming transmission. The computer announced. Talek dropped his food and ran back to the command center display message. The screen filled with unfamiliar symbols, definitely not collective language, but beneath them was a series of mathematical responses to the patterns Talek had sent. Whoever they were, they had understood his basic communication attempt. Computer, analyze this language. Any matches in our database? No exact matches found. However, pattern analysis suggests similarities to languages. From Sector 22, Sector 22 was far from here. At the very edge of collective explored space, the Council had deemed it resource poor and not worth thorough investigation. The message continued streaming in. Among the alien text were simple diagrams. What appeared to be a ship coordinates and a time measurement. Were they telling him they were coming? Computer, respond with our thanks and confirmation. Talek instructed. Use the same mathematical basis we established over the next few hours. Primitive but effective communication continued. Talek learned that the vessel called itself Horizon's Promise and belonged to a species called humans. They had detected his ship's energy signature during a routine scan and investigated out of curiosity. Most importantly, they were indeed coming to his location. Estimated arrival time is 12 days. The computer translated from their latest message. 12 days. Talek could hardly believe it. After being abandoned by his own kind, strangers from an unknown species were coming to help him. It defied logic. A new message appeared on screen. The translation was rough but clear enough. Are you in danger? Do you need medical assistance? The question confused Talek. Of course he was in danger. His ship was failing. But why would they ask about medical needs specifically? The collective would have prioritized the ship and its valuable data, not the individual inside it. Tell them life support is failing, but I am physically stable, Talek dictated. Ask them. He hesitated, then continued. Ask them why they are helping me. The response came faster than expected. Because you need help. Those 4 simple words struck Talek deeply. No cost analysis, no efficiency calculations, just a simple statement of need and response. As the days passed, communication with the human ship improved. Their computer systems were surprisingly adaptable. Quickly learning to translate basic concepts, Talek learned they were on a supply mission to one of their colonies when they detected his signal. You diverted from your assigned mission? Talek asked during one exchange. The colony can wait a few weeks, came the reply. They're not in dire need. You are. This concept was foreign to Talek, and the collective missions were planned with precise efficiency. Deviation was permitted only for the most compelling reasons, usually involving extremely valuable resources or strategic advantage, never for a single-stranded individual. On day 9 of their communication, the human ship sent a new message. We're pushing our engines to maximum. New ETA, 36 hours. Hold on. Talek felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope, but also fear. What if these humans were not what they seemed? The collective taught that other species were either threats or resources. These humans didn't fit either category so far. That night, as Talek tried to sleep, the ship's power fluctuated wildly. He rushed to the command center to find multiple systems failing simultaneously. Computer status report: power core destabilizing, estimated time to complete failure 28 hours. 28 hours. The humans wouldn't arrive for 36. He was going to die just before rescue came. Computer, divert all power to life support and communication. He ordered shut down everything else. The lights dimmed further as the computer complied. Talek sent an urgent message to the approaching ship explaining his situation. Their response was, "Immediate increasing speed, new ETA, 26 hours were coming for you, Talek, stay alive." Talek stared at those words on the screen in his entire career with the collective no one had ever told him to stay alive, as if his individual existence mattered. Above all else, as the ship grew colder and the air thinner, Talek moved to the viewport somewhere out there. Strangers were pushing their engines beyond safe limits, risking their own lives to save his. It made no logical sense by collective standards. Yet as he watched the stars, Talek saw a small point of light growing steadily brighter, moving too fast to be anything natural. Someone was coming for him, not for his ship, not for his data, for him. And for the first time in his life, Talek understood that there might be something more valuable than efficiency. The growing dot of light in the viewport had become a ship. Talek watched with a mixture of hope and disbelief as the human vessel approached his own dying craft. It was smaller than his research ship and strangely shaped, bulky in some areas and thin in others, lacking the sleek efficiency of collective design. Computer status update. Talek rasped, his voice weak in the thinning air. Life support at critical levels. Oxygen at 17% power. Core shut down in 2 hours, 13 minutes. He had survived longer than expected by moving to the smallest compartment on the ship and sealing it off, but soon even that wouldn't be enough. A new message appeared on his screen. Visual contact established. "We see your ship preparing docking procedure, stand by." Docking. Talek frowned. The logical approach would be for them to retrieve his research data remotely, or perhaps use a small probe to recover essential items directly connecting their ship to his failing vessel was unnecessarily risky. Warning. He sent back, "My ship's power core is unstable. Docking not recommended." The response came quickly. "We're not leaving you behind. Docking is the only way to get you out safely." Talek stared at the message in confusion. These humans were willing to risk their ship and their lives to save him personally. It made no sense through the viewport. He watched the human ship maneuver carefully alongside his own. It was clearly not designed for this sort of operation, yet they moved with surprising precision. As they drew closer, Talek could make out details, patches on the hull where repairs had been made, markings in their strange language, and what appeared to be manually operated exterior. Equipment, their technology was primitive compared to the collective's. Yet here they were, while his advanced civilization had abandoned him to die initiating docking procedure. The message read, "Please move to your airlock if possible." Talek gathered his strength and pushed away from the viewport. The short journey to the airlock felt like crossing an entire planet. Each breath was a struggle in the thin air, and his vision blurred at the edges, but he kept moving. When he reached the airlock, he could hear metallic sounds from the other side. The human ship attempting to connect with his incompatible docking system connection failed. Came the next message. "Your docking mechanism is not responding to our signal, switching to Plan B." Plan B. Talek wondered what that could be. In the collective, failed operations were simply aborted. Resources were not wasted on unlikely scenarios. A new sound reached him. A rhythmic tapping on the outer hull near the airlock. Were they cutting their way in? That would be extremely dangerous with the unstable power core. Talk communication device beeped with a new message. "We're creating a temporary seal around your airlock with a pressure bubble. Then we'll cut through, stand back." From the door, he moved away just as the tapping sound increased. Minutes later, the airlock's outer door indicators changed from red to green. Someone had overridden the safety protocols. From outside, the door slid open with a hiss, revealing not the vacuum of space, but a strange transparent tunnel connected to the human ship. Inside this tunnel stood 3 figures in bulky suits. "Hello there," a voice called through a speaker. "I'm Engineer Maria Ortega from the Horizon's Promise. We're here to get you out." Tail stared at the humans. His first sight of this species. They were bipedal with 2 arms and a head, similar to many galactic species, including his own. But their proportions were different. their movements less fluid then. Collective members, you should not have docked. Talek said, his translator converting his words. My power core could fail at any moment. The lead. Human Maria stepped forward. That's why we're using the pressure bubble instead of a hard dock. If your core goes, we can detach in seconds. She gestured to the tunnel between the ships. It wasn't rigid metal, as Talek had assumed, but some kind of flexible material reinforced with a framework. This is not standard rescue equipment. Talek observed. One of the other humans laughed. Standard. We made this thing yesterday after we figured out your airlock specs wouldn't match ours. Made it yesterday. The collective would have spent months designing and testing such equipment before deployment. Can you walk? Maria asked. If not, we can carry you. I can walk, Talek said, though he wasn't entirely sure this was true. As they helped him into the tunnel, Talek's legs gave way without hesitation. The two larger humans caught him, supporting his weight between them. Easy there, one said. We've got you. The trip through the tunnel was short but difficult. Halfway across, a violent shudder ran through Talus's ship power core. Entering final destabilization announced. A mechanical voice from their suits estimated failure in 15 minutes. Move faster, Maria ordered, and the group increased their pace. They had just reached the human ship's airlock when a shrill alarm sounded. Solar flare detected, the voice announced. Radiation surge in 30 seconds. Maria's face, visible through her helmet, showed concern, but not panic. Get him inside. Tom detached the bubble, but leave the frame as the others helped Talek through the airlock. Maria stayed behind, working quickly with tools on the tunnel connection. What is she doing? Talek asked weakly. The radiation. We'll kill her. She's rigging the frame from your ship as a makeshift radiation shield. The human called Tom explained. Our regular shields weren't designed for this kind of flare. Maria finished her work and dashed through the airlock just as the countdown reached 5 seconds. The door sealed behind her with a solid thunk. Brace for impact. She called. The radiation wave hit. Moments later, the ship shook, lights flickered, but the shields held through a small viewport. Talek saw his own ship in the distance, now dark and lifeless. Everything he had worked for, all his research, gone in. The collective, such a loss would be considered catastrophic. Yet these humans were smiling, patting each other on the backs, celebrating. Welcome aboard the Horizon's Promise, said a new voice. Talek turned to see another human approaching. This one wore no suit, just a simple uniform with some kind of insignia. I'm Captain Jack Reynolds, the human said, extending a hand in what Talek recognized from their cultural database. As a greeting gesture. Sorry about the rough pickup. I am Commander Talek of the collective, he replied awkwardly, attempting to mimic the hand gesture. I do not understand why you came for first. Captain Reynolds looked confused. What's to understand? You were in trouble. We received your distress signal, but the resources you expended, the risk to your crew. Your ship. Talek struggled to find the words. The cost-benefit analysis could not possibly justify this rescue. The humans exchanged glances. Cost-benefit, Maria repeated, removing her helmet. We don't leave people to die in space. It doesn't matter what species you are, it's what anyone would do. Tom added. But it wasn't what anyone would do. The collective certainly hadn't. They had calculated his value and found it insufficient to warrant rescue. You need medical attention, Captain Reynolds said. Noticing Talek's weakness, Dr. Wilson is waiting in the medical bay. Can you walk, or should we get a stretcher? I can walk, Talek said again with more determination. This time these humans had risked everything to save him. The least he could do was walk to their medical bay as they led him through their ship. Talek observed everything with growing amazement. The vessel was far less advanced than collective ships, yet ingeniously designed spaces served multiple purposes. Equipment showed signs of repairs and modifications. Nothing was wasted, but neither was efficiency. The only consideration. Most surprising were the crew members they passed. Each one stopped to greet him, some smiling, others nodding respectfully. They seemed genuinely pleased that the rescue had succeeded in the collective. He would have been processed, debriefed, and reassigned. Here he was being welcomed. Captain, Talek said as they reached the medical bay, I must ask again, why did you save me? Captain Reynolds paused, looking thoughtful. Because out here in the deep black all we've got is each other. Doesn't matter what planet you're from or what you look like you needed help. We could provide it, simple as that simple, but to Tallis, it was the most complex idea he had ever encountered. The medical bay of the Horizon's promise was small but clean. Dr. Ben Wilson, a human with graying hair and steady. Hands examined Talc with careful movements. You're dehydrated and malnourished. When Dr. Wilson said, reading from a handheld device, your oxygen levels are low, but they're improving now that you're breathing our air. Talc watched as the doctor prepared an injection. Will that work on my biology? He asked. It should, Dr. Wilson nodded. We analyzed the biological data you sent during our communications. This is just basic nutrients and hydration boosters, nothing too complicated. The doctor's confidence surprised Talc, and the collective doctors would never treat a new species without months of study and testing. You're taking a risk. Talc observed. Dr. Wilson smiled. Life's full of risks. Hold still. Please. The injection was quick and painless. Almost immediately, Talc felt energy returning to his limbs. Rest here. For a while, the doctor instructed. I'll check on you in an hour. Left alone, Talc examined the medical bay more closely. The equipment was functional but basic compared to collective technology. Some devices showed signs of repairs and modifications, not factory standard but clearly effective. His thoughts were interrupted when the door slid open, and Captain Reynolds entered carrying a tray. Thought you might be hungry, the captain said, placing the tray beside Talc. We synthesized this based on the nutritional information you sent. It might not taste like home cooking, but it should keep you going. Talc looked at the simple meal, a bowl of what appeared to be protein cubes in a clear broth. Thank you, he said, the phrase still feeling strange on his tongue. The collective didn't emphasize gratitude. Efficient service was simply expected. Talc ate. Captain Reynolds pulled up a chair so the captain began. Dr. Wilson says you'll make a full recovery. That's good news. Talc nodded, savoring the surprisingly pleasant taste of the food. You have my gratitude, he said formally. When we reach a collective outpost, I will ensure your ship receives proper compensation. For the rescue, Captain Reynolds looked puzzled. We don't need compensation, that's not why we did it. Then I don't understand. Talc admitted. The supply run you mentioned. Was it not important, just routine supplies to New Mars colony? Reynolds said. With a shrug, nothing urgent. We told our commanders it was critical so they wouldn't ask too many questions about the detour. Talc nearly choked on his food. You lied to your superiors. The captain looked uncomfortable. Not lied exactly, just emphasized the importance of the supply run. Some of our higher-ups might have questioned diverting for a rescue so far off our normal routes. So your species also makes efficiency calculations, Talc said, feeling oddly relieved. Some do, Reynolds acknowledged. Bureaucracy exists everywhere. But out here, ship captains have discretion and no captain. I know would leave someone stranded if they could help. This concept of discretion was foreign to Talc. In the collective, all decisions followed standardized protocols. Individual judgment was considered unreliable. May I ask about your people? Reynolds said, changing the subject. This collective, we haven't encountered your kind before. Over the next hour, Talc explained the basics of collective society, their focus on efficiency, their technological advancements, their expansion across multiple star systems. He found himself censoring certain details, uncomfortable sharing how coldly they had abandoned him. And what about humans? Talc asked eventually. You have achieved space travel, yet your technology seems varied in advancement. Reynolds laughed. That's a polite way of saying some of our stuff looks like junk. I didn't mean, no offense taken. The captain assured him. You're right. Human technology is a patchwork. We excel in some areas, lag behind in others. We're good at adapting, making do with what we have, like your pressure bubble. Talc remembered exactly. Not pretty, but it worked. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm. Reynolds tensed, then relaxed as he checked his communications device. Nothing serious, he explained. Engine 3 is running hot again. Maria will handle it, as if summoned by her name. Engineer Maria entered. The medical bay captain, she nodded, then turned to Talik. How are you feeling? Improved. Talik said, I understand. I have you to thank for the rescue. Maria waved dismissively. Team effort, but I came to ask if you'd be willing to look at something. We've been trying to repair our long-range scanner since that solar flare, but the circuitry is fried. Tom thought maybe you might have some insights given your advanced technology. Talik hesitated. Sharing collective technology with other species was strictly forbidden. But then again, the collective had left him for dead. He owed these humans his life. I would be happy to assist, he said an hour later. Talik stood in the engine room of the Horizon's Promise, surrounded by curious human engineers using parts salvaged from his personal devices. He demonstrated how to create a more efficient scanner circuit. This design uses quantum entanglement to maintain signal coherence, he explained. It should improve your range by approximately 300%. The humans watched with fascination as he worked. They asked intelligent questions, quickly grasping concepts that had taken collective scientists generations to develop. Amazing, Tom said when Talik finished. This changes everything. It's just a basic application of quantum principles. Talik said modestly. Maria laughed. Basic for you. Maybe for us, it's revolutionary. As the engineers eagerly implemented his design, Talik felt an unfamiliar emotion. Pride mixed with happiness in the collective technological improvements were expected, not celebrated here. His small contribution was treated as a gift. Later that evening, Captain Reynolds invited Talik to join the crew in what they called the mess hall. Despite the uninviting name, it was a pleasant space where the crew gathered to eat and socialized. Talik sat at a table with the Captain, Maria, and several other crew members. They shared stories of space exploration, trading tales of strange phenomena and narrow escapes. The humans laughed often and spoke with animated gestures. So there we were. Tom was saying, stuck in the asteroid belt with one engine and no navigation. And Maria here decides our best option is to bounce off an asteroid to change course. The table erupted in laughter. Even Talik found himself making the soft, clicking sound that was his species' equivalent. Did it work? He asked. Define work. Maria said with a grin. We changed course. All right, spent the next 2 days spinning like a top until we could stabilize. More laughter followed. Talik was struck by how the humans could find humor in what must have been a dangerous situation in the collective. He said slowly, such an incident would be recorded as a failure and analyzed to prevent recurrence. The responsible parties would be reassigned to less critical duties. A silence fell over the table. Sounds rough, Tom said finally. It is efficient, Talik replied. But the word no longer carried the same certainty it once had to efficiency. Captain Reynolds said, raising his cup in what Talik recognized as a toast. But the captain's tone suggested something closer to mockery than respect, and to finding better ways. Maria added, raising her own cup. The others joined in, looking expectantly at Talik. After a moment's hesitation, he raised his cup as well. To finding better ways, he repeated. As the meal continued, Talik observed the interactions among the crew. The casual touches, the easy laughter, the way they seemed to anticipate each other's needs. This was not the rigid hierarchy he was accustomed to. There was structure, yes, but also a flexibility, a warmth that the collective lacked for the first time. Since his rescue, Talik wondered what would happen when they reached collective space. Would he simply return to his former life? Could he, after experiencing this different way of existing? The thought troubled him more than he cared to admit. Collective space ahead. Captain announced the navigator will cross the border in approximately 3 hours. Captain Reynolds nodded and turned to Talik, who stood beside him on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise. Almost home for you. Talik felt a strange tightness in his chest. After 3 weeks aboard the human ship, the thought of returning to the collective no longer brought the comfort it once would have. Yes, he said simply, unsure how to express his conflicted feelings in no. Those 3 weeks, Talik had become an unofficial member of the crew. He had helped improve their engines, enhanced their communication systems, and even streamlined their life. Support to use less power, the humans had accepted his help with gratitude, rather than the expectation he was accustomed to in the collective. We should discuss what happens next, Reynolds said, gesturing for Talek to follow him to the small meeting room adjacent to the bridge. Once inside, Reynolds activated a display showing the border area. According to our intelligence, the collective maintains regular patrols in this sector. We'll likely encounter them soon after crossing, Talek nodded. The border is heavily monitored. Your ship will be scanned and identified as non-collective low. That'd be a problem. Talek hesitated. The truth was, it might be the collective treated. Unknown vessels with suspicion at best, hostility at worst. But he didn't want to alarm the humans. They will be cautious, he said carefully. I will explain that you rescued me. They will likely demand my return and send me for debriefing. What he didn't say was that the collective would also be extremely interested in the human ship and its technology. Not because it was superior, it wasn't, but because the collective collected all technological data for analysis and potential use. I should prepare a data package. Talek said suddenly, information about the collective, their protocols, language basics. It will help your interactions go more smoothly. Reynolds looked at him curiously. That would be helpful. Thank you. Tail spent the next 2 hours in his quarters preparing not just basic information about the collective, but also something else. Something that went against everything he had been taught. He was identifying weaknesses and collective defensive systems, details that might help the humans if things went wrong when they were 1 hour from the border. Captain Reynolds called the senior crew for a briefing. Talek attended at the captain's request. We're about to enter collective space, Reynolds explained to the assembled group. Talek has provided information to help us communicate effectively. Our goal is simple: return Talek to his people and continue our journey. What if they're not friendly? Maria asked, voicing what others were clearly thinking. Reynolds looked to Talek. For an answer, the collective values efficiency above all. Talek explained they will not attack without reason. As conflict is inefficient, but they will want to examine your ship and technology. They may insist on it. And if we refuse, Tom asked. Talek's response was candid. They would interpret that as hostile intent. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Then we'll be diplomatic. Reynolds decided we'll allow basic scans, but decline any boarding requests. We're in their territory, so we'll be respectful, but we won't compromise our ship. The crew nodded in agreement, though tension remained visible on their faces as they dispersed to their stations. Maria approached Talek. Are you okay? She asked quietly. You seem troubled. Talek was surprised by her perception. A collective member would never have noticed or commented on his emotional state. I am uncertain. He admitted the collective declared me a loss. My return will disrupt their efficiency calculations. Maria smiled slightly. Good. Maybe they could use some disruption before Talek could respond. The alert system activated. Captain to the bridge came. The navigators voiced collective vessels approaching when they reached the bridge. The view screen showed 3 sleek ships moving rapidly toward them. Talek recognized them immediately. Enforcement vessels designed to intercept and neutralize threats. They're scanning us, Tom reported from his station. Reynolds straightened his uniform, open communications. The view screen shifted to show a stern-faced collective officer. Talek recognized the insignia. High Commander Vex, the same official who had declared him a lost, unidentified vessel. Vex stated coldly, You have entered collective space without authorization. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. Reynolds remained calm. Greetings, High Commander. I'm Captain Jack Reynolds of the Earth vessel, Horizon's Promise. We're here to return Commander Talek to the collective after rescuing him from his damaged ship. Vex's expression shifted subtly at the mention of Talek's name. Commander Talek was declared lost. His recovery was deemed inefficient. Nevertheless, we found him and rescued him. Reynolds replied, He's alive and well. Bring Talek into view. Vex demanded. Talek stepped forward, standing beside Reynolds. High Commander, he acknowledged formally. Collective space ahead. Captain announced the navigator. We'll cross the border in approximately 3 hours. Captain Reynolds nodded and turned to Talek, who stood beside him on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise. Almost home for you. Talek felt a strange tightness in his chest after 3 weeks aboard. The human ship, The thought of returning to the collective no longer brought the comfort it once would have. Yes, he said, simply unsure how to express his conflicted feelings in those 3 weeks. Talek had become an unofficial member of the crew. He had helped improve their engines, enhance their communication systems, and even streamline their life support to use less power. The humans had accepted his help with gratitude rather than the expectation he was accustomed to in the collective. "We should discuss what happens next," Reynolds said, gesturing for Dalek to follow him to the small meeting room adjacent to the bridge. Once inside, Reynolds activated a display showing the border area. "According to our intelligence, the collective maintains regular patrols in this sector. We'll likely encounter them soon after crossing." Talk nodded. "The border is heavily monitored. Your ship will be scanned and identified as non-collective low. That'd be a problem." Talek hesitated. The truth was, it might be the collective treated unknown vessels with suspicion, at best hostility at worst, but he didn't want to alarm the humans. "They will be cautious," he said carefully. "I will explain that you rescued me. They will likely demand my return and send me for debriefing." What he didn't say was that the collective would also be extremely interested in the human ship and its technology. Not because it was superior. It wasn't. But because the collective collected all technological data for analysis and potential use. "I should prepare a data package," Talek said. "Suddenly information about the collective, their protocols, language basics. It will help your interactions go more smoothly." Reynolds looked at him curiously. "That would be helpful." "Thank you." Talek spent the next 2 hours in his quarters preparing. Not just basic information about the collective, but also something else. Something that went against everything he had been taught. He was identifying weaknesses in collective defensive systems, details that might help the humans if things went wrong when they were 1 hour from the border. Captain Reynolds called the senior crew for a briefing. Talek attended at the captain's request. "We're about to enter collective space." Reynolds explained to the assembled group, "Talek has provided information to help us communicate effectively. Our goal is simple: return Talek to his people and continue our journey." "What if they're not friendly?" Maria asked, voicing what others were clearly thinking. Reynolds looked to Talek for an answer. "The collective values efficiency above all." Talek explained, "They will not attack without reason, as conflict is inefficient, but they will want to examine your ship and technology. They may insist on it." "And if we refuse?" Tom asked. Talek's response was candid. They would interpret that as hostile intent. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Then we'll be diplomatic." Reynolds decided. "We'll allow basic scans but decline any boarding requests. We're in their territory, so we'll be respectful, but we won't compromise our ship." The crew nodded in agreement, though tension remained visible on their faces as they dispersed to their stations. Maria approached Talek. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. "You seem troubled." Talek was surprised by her perception. A collective member would never have noticed or commented on his emotional state. "I am uncertain," he admitted. "The collective declared me a loss. My return will disrupt their efficiency calculations." Maria smiled slightly. "Good, maybe they could use some disruption." Before Talek could respond, the alert system activated. "Captain, to the bridge," came the navigator's voice. "Collective vessels approaching." When they reached the bridge, the view screen showed 3 sleek ships moving rapidly toward them. Talek recognized them immediately. Enforcement vessels designed to intercept and neutralize threats. "They're scanning us," Tom reported from his station. Rins straightened his uniform. "Open communications." The view screen shifted to show a stern-faced collective officer. Talek recognized the insignia. High Commander Vex, the same official who had declared him a loss unidentified vessel. Vex stated coldly, "You have entered collective space without authorization. Prepare to be boarded for inspection." Reynolds remained calm. "Greetings. High Commander, I'm Captain Jack Reynolds of the Earth vessel Horizon's Promise. We're here to return Commander Talek to the collective after rescuing him from his damaged ship." Vex's expression shifted subtly at the mention of Talek's name. Commander Talek was declared lost. His recovery was deemed inefficient. Nevertheless, we found him and rescued him. Reynolds replied, "He's alive and well. Bring Talek into view," Vex demanded. Talek stepped forward, standing beside Reynolds. "Hi, Commander," he acknowledged formally. Vex's eyes narrowed. "You will return to the collective immediately for debriefing. The human vessel will submit to full inspection and technology assessment. We're happy to return Commander Talek, if that is his wish," Reynolds said diplomatically. "But we must decline the inspection. We're on a time-sensitive mission. This is not a request," Vex responded. "This is a directive." Talek saw the enforcement vessels moving into position around the Horizon's promise. They were preparing to force compliance. Captain Talek said quietly, "They will not accept refusal." Reynolds glanced at him. Options. Talek hesitated only briefly before making his decision. Their shield configurations are vulnerable to a specific energy pulse. He quickly explained the technical details that would disable them. Reynolds asked temporarily. Talek confirmed. Long enough to depart, Reynolds looked surprised. "You'd help us against your own people. They abandoned me." Talek said simply, "You did not." Reynolds turned back to the screen. "Hi, Commander, we respectfully maintain our position. We will return Commander Talek, but we cannot submit to inspection. Then you leave us no choice," Vex replied coldly. "Prepare to be boarded by force." The transmission ended on the sensor display. The enforcement vessels powered up their weapon systems. Maria Reynolds called, "Implement Talek's modifications." Tom, "Prepare for emergency acceleration." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, following Tal's instructions to create the energy pulse that would disrupt the collective vessel's shields. "Ready, Captain?" Maria reported moments later. "Wait," Talk said suddenly. He stepped forward again. "Let me speak to them once more." Reynolds nodded. "Open the channel high." Commander Vex appeared on screen again, clearly irritated. "Your delay is inefficient, High Commander." Talix began. "I wish to address the Collective Council directly." Vex frowned. "That is not protocol. Neither is abandoning a commander and then demanding his return." Talek responded with a firmness that surprised even himself after a long pause. Vex nodded. "The Council will hear you." The screen shifted to show 5 stern faces. The ruling council of the Collective. Talek recognized them all. "Commanders," he greeted them formally. "I stand before you as one declared a loss, yet living you abandoned. Me to die in space, calculating that my life was worth less than the fuel needed to rescue me." The council members remained impassive. "These humans," Talek continued, "with their primitive ships and limited resources, decided differently. They diverted. Their mission risked their lives and used precious supplies to save a stranger of a different species." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I have lived among them. I have seen a society that values individual life alongside efficiency. They collaborate. Rather than calculate, they celebrate survival. Rather than accepting loss, and their approach has produced innovations. Our rigid thinking has missed." One of the council members spoke. "Your emotional attachment to these humans is clouding your judgment." "Commander Talek," perhaps Talek acknowledged. "Or perhaps it has cleared it. I believe the Collective can learn from humans just as they can learn from us. I propose an exchange knowledge and resources rather than force," the council members conferred. Silently among themselves, finally, the central figure spoke. "Your proposal has merit," she admitted reluctantly. "It would be efficient to learn from a new species through cooperation rather than conflict." Talek felt relief wash over him. "Thank you, Counselor." However, she continued, "You must return to complete your debriefing." Talek looked at Captain Reynolds, then back at the council. "I will return," he said, "but as an ambassador to humans, not as a failure to be processed, and I request that the Horizon's promise be granted safe passage through collective space." More silent conferring followed. Finally, the council gave their answer. Agreed. An escort will be provided when the transmission ended. The bridge of the Horizon's promise erupted in relieved chatter. The enforcement vessels had powered down their weapons and moved to escort positions. "Well done," Reynolds said, clapping Talek on the shoulder. A human gesture of approval he had come to appreciate. I must still return. Talek reminded him. Reynolds nodded. I know, but not as a prisoner, as an ambassador, it will not be easy. Talek admitted the collective resists change, so do humans, sometimes Reynolds said with a smile. But we learn, and it sounds like your people might be ready to learn too, as the Horizon's promise moved deeper into collective space under escort. Tal stood at the viewport, watching the stars of his home territory. He had been abandoned in deep space, left for dead. By his own kind, a human ship had responded, saving not just his life, but his perspective. Whatever came next, Talek knew one thing with certainty. Efficiency. Wasn't everything sometimes the most valuable things couldn't be calculated at all?